Hi, so welcome to the panel on HIV parenting and surrogacy. And I've been told I need to thank Circle Surrogacy for underwriting the panel and arranging to bring Brian and Kristi, who are actual people with experience from the patient point of view. So I just, my name is Kiessling. I'm from the Bedford Research Foundation, and I'll be doing a little bit of moderating. And I'm going to let Dr. Kiessling talk mostly about what the foundation does and how our process works. But I'll just do a brief introduction of people on the panel. And this is Kristi, and I just met her myself. She's one of the surrogates who's come down to speak about the process. This is Dr. Michael Doyle from CT Fertility, and he's been doing this for a very long time, and he's an expert on infertility and IVF. And this is Brian Rosenberg. He's one of our patients who has come through the SPAR program. And he's also a father of three. And this is Seth Rosenberg from GMHC, who's here to come here to speak a little bit about their services. And this is Dr. Ann Kiessling from the Bedford Research Foundation. She's the director of the Bedford Research Foundation. And I'll kind of let them do their own introductions and then come back and answer and take questions from the audience. So the first person who will speak will be...
Why don't I'll just start since I
Sure.
Get it out of that.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Seth Rosen. I'm the Managing Director of Development, Marketing, Communications at GMHC. Maybe I'll turn it off. Okay. I really just wanted to say GMHC is so proud to be a co-sponsor of today's session. GMHC is the world's first HIV/AIDS organization, and we work with about 10,000 clients a year, ranging from the age of 17 to over 70. We have a variety of programs, everything from nutrition to benefits advocacy to mental health services. And we have many parents in our community, both men and women, gay and straight, who are parents biologically, through surrogacy, and through adoption. And we really just want to say that please look at us as a resource for any of your HIV-related needs. Our doors are always open. We're at 33rd between 9th and 10th. And we also do quite a bit of legal work along with our benefits advocacy. So if we can be helpful, please come find us. I think the majority of the information today will be these wonderful panelists, but GMHC does want to say how much we support your entree into parenthood and what you're looking for, and please come see us if we can provide anything. Thank you.
Thanks, Seth. So I think we'll start with Dr. Kiessling and do a brief overview of the Bedford Research Foundation and the SPAR program. And we have a lot of feedback.
Can you hear me? I speak pretty loud. If I talk too fast, somebody raise your hand and say you're talking too fast. That's a problem. I think for this one of interest to understand why I started the SPAR program, and it was because I am older than HIV disease, and I was studying that family of viruses before HIV disease was recognized. And I had a friend, I was at the medical school in Portland, Oregon, and I had a friend come down the hall saying that they thought there was a sexually transmitted immunosuppressive disease. Did I think I could look for a retrovirus in a semen specimen? And we said, sure, not realizing what that meant. And so we did the very first studies of HIV in semen in 1983. Now, since then, that is, if you do the quick math, 30 years ago, our lab has spent a lot of effort and energy trying to understand how this virus gets into semen and how it is a sexually transmitted disease. And to this day, 30 years later, we do not know. We know a little bit more about it. So mostly what we do at the Bedford Research Foundation is the research around this question. How does HIV get into semen, and how is it an infectious transmission agent? In the late 80s, or the mid 80s, I was recruited to Harvard to help head up one of their, the big IVF labs in one of the Harvard teaching hospitals, and bring our HIV research to the medical school. And in the late 80s, I wrote an editorial to Fertility and Sterility, which is the American Society of Reproductive Medicine's journal. And it was a very simple, I thought, essay that said, somebody's going to have to help figure out how to help people with HIV disease parent, because people are going to live a long time with this disease. Nobody ever dies acutely of HIV. We knew that there were a lot of antivirals coming down the pipeline. People who were HIV infected were of parenting age. And just as a fact, which you guys may or may not know, the rate of new HIV infections in the US has not changed in 30 years. It's between 40 and 60,000 new infections per year, despite the widespread use of antiretroviral therapy. So there is something about HIV and semen that also doesn't respond to the drugs quite the same way, and this is a big focus of ours. So when I wrote this little editorial, it was way too soon for the reproductive community. It got me into huge political trouble, and which I had a lot of help getting over. But the bottom line was the phone started to ring, and people who were HIV infected who wanted to parent began to call and say, "So what are you doing about this? So what's happening?" So at that point in time, this is now like the early 90s, we started pulling together what we called a special program of assisted reproduction. And it got into political problems. It got caught in a hospital merger. And the lawyers, actually two of the lawyers that were helping with the merger, nobody realized, were HIV infected. One of them had hemophilia. And so they recognized that the program was at risk, and I overnight became a foundation director. So they took the funds that had been organized for this program out of the merger, set it aside as a Massachusetts public charity, and that's how that happened. And so then after that, we pulled together a program because, as I said, the phone didn't stop ringing. And so that's what we've been doing ever since. What we have put in place, we believe, we have an ethics advisory board that helps us with this. We also have our own human subjects committee. So this program, from our standpoint, was set up as like a clinical trial. And the idea was that we would establish some methods and a way to go about doing this, and that some infertility laboratory somewhere would decide that this was a good thing to do, and they would take it on, and we would muddle around in our research woes trying to understand the virus. And now, of course, what the foundation's really focused on is we've figured out now that we can probably engineer patient-specific stem cells to actually cure HIV disease. So we've gone from, we understand the semen problem is big, but now we've decided that the best way to get rid of it is to actually cure the disease. So that's going to be a while down the pike, but the methods for doing that now are getting much, much easier to do. So the program that we have in place is kind of cumbersome because it's still set up as a clinical trial. I think Dr. Doyle can talk about what it's like to interact with the lab. We have it set up so that if a surrogate is involved, we must meet the couple in person. And that's kind of a barrier to entry that some people really resent. When they make the effort, though, to come and meet with us and we can explain everything that's going to happen, people don't complain after that. But coming in person can be a real trial. You have to go through a lot of FDA-mandated tissue donor testing, just as if you were donating a kidney. And so that also makes it cumbersome. It has to be time matched to the semen specimens. So it's kind of a process that you have to work through. And if the specimens don't have, if they're undetectable for virus and they're free to use, it's a pretty speedy process. If the specimens test positive and something has to change, we have to figure out what's going on, then it takes a long time and people get cross. Surrogacy agencies begin to say, what are you doing? Why is this taking so long? Confidentiality is huge with us, so we don't communicate those kinds of complicating positive results to anybody but the client. We were recently inspected by both the FDA, came and inspected us. They come unannounced, showing up the badge in a uniform. We were inspected by the federal clinical laboratory people. They came and inspected us. And then the Massachusetts Department of Public Health came. So we've been now inspected and clear, and essentially sanctioned by all those groups. But in Massachusetts, it's quirky. You cannot give a test, if you are a licensed laboratory, we've been a clinically licensed laboratory for a long time, because that seemed to me to be important to do. But if you are a clinically licensed laboratory in Massachusetts, you cannot give a test result to a patient unless the doctor checks a box that says it's okay to do that. Well, when we were doing this as a research project, we weren't doing that. So now we have to have some kind of test result or test requisition from a physician caring for the client. And we have elected to have that be the person's infectious disease physician. So, because we think the infectious disease physician is the caregiver who needs to know if the semen specimens are testing positive. Many infectious disease docs don't appreciate that this is a two-compartment disease and that what's going on in the bloodstream is not necessarily what's going on in the semen compartment. So if you have to work through that, those complicated cases are the ones in which it was really a good idea that everybody came in person, because I have a chance to actually say, here's what's going to happen if they test positive. These are conversations that you really can't have by Skype. At least we've tried that a couple times, and it's very uncomfortable and difficult. So for the moment, we're still requiring people who need a surrogate to come in person and have a chat with us. It's a tiny little operation. Brian's going to tell you what it's like to go there. Communication isn't always easy because most of us are doing research. So, but it gets better every year. We're trying to actually raise enough funds so we can get an administrative person more in charge of this. Because as I said, each year we've had, 10 years ago, I would have told you that by now this isn't an issue. That either some program that wants to do this kind of testing has taken it on and away from us, or that people who've been on antivirals for 15 years would no longer be shedding virus into semen specimens. And to our amazement, the rate hasn't changed. Every year, sometime in January, we add up how many specimens were tested the year before, what percentage of them tested positive. And it's always right around 14 to 16% of specimens test positive. If somebody's not on antiviral therapy, the percentage is higher, but it's not 100%. So nobody has ever had 100% of specimens in my years of doing this test positive, even if they're not on antiviral therapy. So our only counsel to people, and real requirement, I guess, is that the intended parents be in the care of a qualified physician. So they have to have an infectious disease doc or somebody who's taking care of their HIV disease. These people have to be serious about their disease. If they're going to be parents, they have a serious disease and they need to be seriously taking good care of it. That's a real requirement of mine. If it's a single parent, that's complicated for us because we're concerned about a child who has a parent with a serious disease. And so our job is the surrogate in this child. So they kind of have to have a plan in their head or a plan for what would happen if they got sicker. So those are a bunch of the reasons that we still require people, especially if we need a surrogate to come and see us in person. If the surrogate is not involved, if it's a heterosexual couple, then we frequently, and they have a fertility clinic that's willing to help them, then we frequently just have a phone consult. And the purpose of that is the same thing. Here's what's going to happen if the specimens test positive and you can't use that sperm. No one has ever failed to come up with sperm that could be used if they didn't give up. So if the specimens test positive, a couple things have to happen. You have to kind of figure out why. Do they need to change their antiviral medicine? Do you need to send them to a urologist because they've got an infection in their prostate that's driving the HIV? Something like that has to happen, and we can just point them, in the right direction for the caregiver. But if they do all of that, then nobody's ever failed to get through the program from our standpoint. But sometimes to get through there, it's like a year before the fertility clinic hears from them again. And so that can be a frustrating year for the surrogacy agency, the fertility clinic, and everything. But for confidentiality reasons, we're not going to disclose what's going on with this individual This is their medical history kind of record, and so it's not leaving us except to go to the infectious disease doctor. Okay, any questions? Is that kind of too fast? We've been doing this a long time. We'd like to make it simpler. We've actually just written a grant to the Elton John Foundation to see if we can make it simple. Melissa?
Do you know how many babies have been born from surrogacies that your clinic assisted in?
We don't know the surrogacy number, I don't think.
I don't think we do.
It's in the dozens, okay? It's not like 10 or 20, it's in the dozens. I don't think it's 100. See, one of the problems we have actually is that clinics that store the sperm, some clinics store the sperm once it's been tested, other clinics send it back to us after the procedure. For clinics who store the sperm, when the couple comes through the second time, we're not always in that loop. We only stay in that loop if we stay in touch with the client. So,
Are you the only place that would be testing the sperm? Or I mean, I know that the couples that have come to us have all gone through your clinic, but is there any other, would you be, to me that seems low, that number. And I would think it would be, I know we've probably done close to a dozen. I would think it would be more like 100, but.
no, there's only as from our records, and as I say, we have to go through each person and say, have you gone through again and we didn't know about it? There's something like 185 babies total.
I see the questions coming up, and I'm just wondering if we could save them towards the end, because I'd like to give Dr. Doyle a chance to talk about his work at CT Fertility and give our other panelists a chance to talk, and then come back to questions. Would that be okay? All right, so Dr. Doyle.
So we have how much time for everyone?
If you want to do, I think that was about 10 minutes, if you want to talk about
All right,
your work.
I think what I have to say can be shorter than some of the amazing things you're going to hear after me. So in 1983, when you were doing your thing, I was second-year medical student at UC San Francisco, where men were presenting all over the place at San Francisco General and everywhere else with very mysterious diseases that took us all a few years to figure out. So I'm very struck with the parallel nature of our trajectory. In 1989, when I was the chief president at Penn, we did a journal club about treating HIV-positive men reproductively, which featured your work, and it was very relevant to me. And you're right, it was controversial and confusing and challenging for the reproductive professional community. Yeah. And so I feel like, and we're actually meeting today for the first time, which is amazing to me, because I agree with Melissa. I have helped at least 10 dads succeed through you, exclusively by working with you. It's great place. I think you have a little bit more than you think. I think, but the point is, over the last 20 years, as the reproductive professional community has rallied around helping all sorts of individuals to create the families that they deserve, I think this might be one of the final frontiers, treating those affected or infected with HIV. And so I think it's to my knowledge, it's the first time there's been a group discussion like this at Men Having Babies. I'm sure it's not the last. I feel like my conversation today can be limited to making one point, which is, how is this process for the dad different from conventional surrogacy? That was one of the two questions I was asked to speak to. The fact is, it's no different in virtually any way, and I hope that that's a powerful and reassuring message for you to hear. The sperm is, the semen is tested, and those semen samples that test negative, completely negative for the virus, are frozen and quarantined, stored, and used. And when we use them, we have exactly the same rates of fertilization, exactly the same rates of embryo development, the same rates of blastocyst formation, and the same pregnancy rates that would be associated with the same processes in HIV unaffected men or fresh sperm samples. So the fact that there had been HIV, or the fact that the sperm had been processed, frozen, stored, thawed, and used, doesn't influence. So anything that you heard today that made you feel good about with where technology is, that we're putting 2 embryos in now when you have an 80% chance of being successful, or you can put one embryo in and have a 60% chance of being successful, or you can freeze your embryos, you can make all the same decisions that anybody else can make, I think is rather exciting, and that this becomes really an issue of safety and informed consent. So while the process for the dad or dads doesn't change really fundamentally in any way, and certainly in the laboratory the same, for the surrogate and her family, of course, very important issues, and so I'll spend 2 minutes about that. A lot of people, when I meet with dads with HIV, can't imagine that anyone will ever be able to even find them a care. Well, why would, I mean, first, once you get past the more general question, why would a woman even want to be a surrogate? And then to define it to why would a woman want to be a surrogate for a gay couple, and then get to HIV. I think the answer is the same, and I feel like you have to know a little bit of an appreciation of the fact that women who raise their hand to become surrogates under any circumstances are really amazing. They're not only just good at being pregnant and like being pregnant and can be pregnant, really, true enough, but I feel like they share a couple common characteristics, and one of them is an intense desire to, in one way or another, make a difference, to be able to use whatever it is in their life, their gift, whatever ability that they have to just be for another person or a couple, someone that changed their life in such a profound way. And maybe a surrogate, maybe she will, but maybe she won't ever be a CEO of a company, and maybe she'll never write a best-selling book, or maybe she'll never win an Oscar. But what she can do in her world and in her family and in her community is really as empowering as nothing else can be, which is to help someone to have their child or children. So then you take that up a notch, and there are going to be some surrogates who've been there, done that. They had twins. They've already surpassed what most women would even think about trying to do. And then for a repeat journey, there might be like, now what can I do? And there's an extremely sincere and authentic dialogue that the subset, a lot of first-time surrogates are much less often to want to carry for a high-risk situation or something that could be perceived that. But I'm amazed at how I don't sell this to people. I talk to the women who identify themselves as being open to being caring for HIV positive dad or dads, and we talk about the fact that this must sound on the surface like it's so risky, but let's just look at the data. Are you actually putting yourself at risk, and if so, what are those risks? And truthfully, does it make sense? Because what you're doing is so amazing. Let's not put you at risk, and until we can have enough of a conversation that says there have been, not just from Dr. Kiessling's, but across the country now, when you look at HIV positive dads and moms that are either contributing their sperm or their eggs or giving birth, we're really at the point medically where there has not been a single case of HIV transmission to a surrogate or to a baby born through this process. And so, can we say the risk is zero? I mean, you can't. Pregnancy has risk. Everything has risk. But taking the subway here today had risk. So, without being zero carved in stone, it's about as close to zero as it can possibly be, and that's as far as I feel like I can go with the conversation with a surrogate. I find it's if someone has a partner or a husband or someone's important in their life who's just like, I know, I believe it's safe, but I just can't go, then let's not go there. There are other people, and we would never want to put a surrogate in a position, even though she might be really comfortable, if her primary support system wasn't comfortable, because it just isn't going to be the same journey that it could be otherwise. So that the way that I have to approach it, any of the doctors have to approach it medically, is just the same way all the FDA things that you have to do, whether it's HIV related or hepatitis related or any infectious disease related or geographical issues, is we have the obligation, and you're right, the FDA, they do every year, they show up with their it's amazing. They show up and they go through your charts, and it's the real deal. There are lots of consequences for not being completely compliant with every aspect. But we have an obligation to make sure that we understand what the infectious disease risk is, with regard to the embryos we produce to the surrogate that we place that embryo or embryos into. There's nothing on the list of of FDA required items that will preclude you from doing this. It's just about informed consent. So my obligation legally and ethically is to spend all the time that's necessary with the surrogate and point out that these are the issues that come out on the profile, whether they're historical issues or laboratory issues or physical issues that present whatever risk they present and quantitate those risks and let that surrogate make a very informed decision. And that's the same process we do with any man producing sperm that's creating embryos and any woman who's donating the eggs that are producing the embryos. They're very parallel, and HIV is obviously, one of the things on the list. But like I said, I can't wait to hear what you're going to say, because I wasn't your doctor, but I feel like you're probably going to authenticate some of these things. It's really just about empowering people to make the decisions and choices with as much accurate and not politically energized information or marketing information, but really making an informed decision about whether this is safe and whether this is right for them. And for some surrogates, it might be an even more amazing journey for them to put themselves in the position of caring for an HIV affected. Some carriers feel like, women who've had reproductive cancers and can't carry, there's some resonance there, and that's the couple they want to care for. There's no one formula for matching people, but I think as long as it's based on accurate information and authentic communication, it ultimately becomes the decision of the carrier and her family and the people that support her.
Thanks.
That's a good segue.
That is a good segue. Okay, so Kristi, if you want to say a few words about your experience.
Well, I guess I'll start with how I even thought about being a carrier.
Need to do a microphone switch.
I don't know that this really made you sound louder, but
I think it's for taping.
oh, okay. My sister had ovarian cancer when she was 9, and they removed one ovary in her uterus, so she was never able to have kids. And I think growing up, knowing that just kind of put me in a different place than a lot of people, and I thought I would potentially carry for her after I had my children. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I had a conversation with her before I got started in the program, and she decided not to have kids. And I still kind of felt like it was something I just needed to do. I kind of thought I was going to do it anyway. So I'm working with Surrogacy, and I got my first profile sent to me, and it was kind of shocking. It's a gay couple. They are from Israel, and they're HIV positive. So it's kind of a lot to take in at first. It was my first profile, and it was just kind of unexpected, but I, in my profile, agreed that I'm willing to work with people of HIV positive, international, all those things. So my husband and I just talked for the weekend, and we agreed to Skype with them. And I'm so glad that I did. They're amazing. I didn't look at another profile. That was them. So I'm about 3.5 months with twins, and we know that they each have their own baby. We kept the embryos separate, and they both took the first time. We worked with a clinic in LA, so here I am.
You must have had a talk.
We did have a talk, and Anne really made me feel safe doing it. She really answered all my questions and made me feel comfortable. And like he said, I couldn't not do it for them because they were HIV positive. When you could deliver for somebody that is diagnosed with cancer a year later. You just never know. And I didn't want that to be something that changed my mind working with them, and with the numbers that they told me, it was just right. And
Was your husband on the call too?
no, he was not. But he's been really amazing. I mean, kind of a lot for him to take in, and really my entire community. I live in a small town in Illinois, so it's really kind of not something, no one at work knows any surrogates, especially for a gay couple or an HIV positive couple. So it's been.
Does the community know the whole story?
Are you public with the information? Are you public?
I haven't really told people about HIV. I talked with Ann about that, and I don't want the hospital to freak out. So I kind of leave that out. If someone ever asked me, then I would be open with it. But it's just something that doesn't really, I don't know. I don't think about it when I talk to them. I don't know. They're just my couple, and but it's kind of a lot for my community and the people I work with. I think my parents were more accepting of it when I first told them I was going to do this because of my sister, and they're just more understanding. My husband's family is more small town. It took a lot. They're coming around and supportive, but it wasn't the easiest thing for them to digest. But they're getting there. And
What do you do at work?
I process Social Security claims for disability, and
I was just curious because you said they all thought it was weird, so I was wondering
yeah.
what kind of office you might be in.
Well, and it's not really just my office. It's really more of just where I live, I think. I'm close to St. Louis, so that's where I'll be delivering, and they're a little more open-minded, it seems, on that side of the river, but there's a lot of farm towns and stuff by me, so it's been interesting, and everyone always asks me, how are you going to give up the babies? And I always think they're not mine to give away to begin with. And after every appointment, I can't wait to call my couple about it and share it with them. And with my pregnancies, I couldn't wait to call my husband to tell him if he didn't make the appointment. And so I can tell there is a difference, there's a separation there, but I'm so excited for them. It's theirs, and
We'll have a chance to come back and ask questions. But I wanted to give Brian a chance to talk about his experience and going through the process, and anything that you wanted to talk about for a few minutes.
Sure, thanks. So, hi everybody, I'm Brian. So it's kind of cool to me, or interesting, or worth noting to me that this is 2013. It's a big milestone year for me. First, this is actually my 25th year living with HIV. But more importantly is on June 20th, my partner and I celebrated our 20th anniversary by getting legally hitched. Thank you. And it was cool. I'm from Boston. He's from Holland. We met in Boston, then we moved together to New York. Due to immigration issues, we moved to Toronto. Do you really need this? No one's. Oh, for the recording. No one's ever told me I need a microphone before. And then 4 years ago, we moved to Toronto to deal with Ferdinand's legal status. And of course, a week after we got married, DOMA was put down. But the reason I bring that up is because our wedding was really awesome in that we had people from Boston, from Holland, from New York, and from Toronto at it. But what made it really, really special was the fact that our ring bearer was our 4-year-old son, Levi, and our flower girls were our 3-year-old twin girls, Sadie and Ella. So, as I said, I've been positive for 25 years. Early on, so I did it backward. I actually came out of the closet as being HIV positive before I came out as being gay. So I went and dealt with the whole HIV thing,
And then finally I went to a therapist and we're like, this is ridiculous, I really need to come out as being gay. So I did that, and then I met Ferd right after, and we spent the next, I don't know, 6 or 7 years sort of living with our lens, looking at everything through HIV. And so certainly we did not think about becoming parents then. And then we spent, after my health was doing well, we spent the next 7 or 10 years looking, we're gay, let's go have fun. And so that's when we moved to New York City. And again, the parenting thing never came up. And quite frankly, I never really thought, between being gay and HIV positive, that parenting was actually an option for us. By the way, my husband, I keep calling him partner because that's what I'm used to for 20 years. He is HIV negative, was HIV negative when we met, and remains HIV negative today. And we always, about 10 years ago, I always loved kids. I was a babysitter and a camp counselor when I was in high school, and loved my nieces and nephews and my Ferdinand's nieces and nephews and little kids of our friends from college. But again, just never thought it was something we'd be able to realize. And then around, 9, 10 years ago, HIV was just in the back burner, and being gay was no different than being anything else. We started saying, well, what is life? We were sort of both were on this search, a journey for sort of more meaning. And for us, that was becoming dads. So again, I'm HIV positive, so we just assumed that we'd be adopting, which was totally fine for both of us because we both know that we could fall in love easily with anyone's baby, and as I have a million times over. And so we started the adoption thing, which I tell you was a real rigmarole because of my HIV status, et cetera, and having to, we had to open up, as any couple who wants to adopt, you have to open up your lives to major inspection through numerous agencies, et cetera. We went, at any rate, so we went to the adoption path, and like a year and a half, 2 years went by, and nothing happened. And then we said, okay, this is maybe not going to happen for us, so we need to investigate other options. Surrogacy. Well, again, Ferd's HIV negative, and so we said, okay, great, so, go for it. He's like, and he just did not, for whatever reason, he just felt like he did not want to be a biological dad if we couldn't both try to be a biological dad. So on his own, he did research and came across you guys. And so we then called up, and we met with Dr. Kiessling, and it was an awesome experience. It sure is. It's a small place, small facility, but it was an awesome experience. They prepped us exactly what we're going to do at this visit and then what would happen next. And then we went there, and I forget his name now, the gentleman who worked at the clinic at the time. Josh, thank you. Mass was also very helpful, and then we got to meet with her, and we were both just like blown away. I mean, the things that you were just saying now, it's like, that's crazy, right? And so we said, yes, we're going to do this. And then we said, well, we'll both try to become bio-dads, because I'm like, I'm not going to just be the only one. But then the next step was we had to find a surrogacy agency. So we also used Surrogacy, which is why I guess I can't be on this panel as well. And then literally 4 days after we signed the contract with the surrogacy agency, we got a call from our adoption agency to tell us that a baby boy was born in Brooklyn 3 days ago. Did we want him? And I'm like, is he healthy? Well, no, tomorrow. So the next day they called us back. He said, he's healthy, you have to come and get him tomorrow.
Wow.
So we went and picked up Levi. And then we knew we didn't want to have an only child. I have a nephew who's an only child. I have a cousin who's an only child, and just wanted to have siblings. So we said, we've already signed an agreement with the surrogacy agency. We already know about SPAR. We've got my HIV thing taken care of. Let's go that route as well. We'll just try it once. And so we found a gestational carrier who really actually does fit exactly, Dr. Doyle, what you were describing. She had given birth already for another gay couple. She had twin girls as well. She's actually now just gave birth for the third time to a singleton. She actually was on a listserv. I don't know if what a listservs are, those groups online where you can meet other gestational carriers. And she said that on that listserv, all the women who were working with straight couples, like so many of them were complaining about having to deal with the wife of the couple. I guess, there's some resentment, et cetera. And so this is just how she described it to me. I'm not telling you that's what goes on. She said that she really only wanted to work with gay couples. And because she had done it once, she was already familiar with the process, that when our agency said, hey, how about working with an HIV positive couple, same thing as you described, she was willing to, why not? Let's do it. And she lives in, what I would call very, very small town, West Virginia. Certainly not very familiar with gays or HIV positive outwardly people. But we had a great experience with her as well, and our husband was involved, and we're still in touch with them. We were hoping that she would be here today to join us, but she can't get off work tomorrow. In fact, when she actually gave birth, Ferd and I drove down, and her mom was there, and mom was feeding one of the girls, and Andrea, our gestational carrier, was feeding the other girl. And actually, we took them out of the hospital, stayed in a hotel because we had to get passports for the girls before we could take them to Canada, where we're living, and they came and helped take care of them in our hotel room. So we had an incredibly awesome experience with them. And here we are today.
All right, thanks, Brian.
Thanks.
We have just a few minutes for questions, and I know I saw a couple come up earlier. Is it still?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have a million questions, but I'll just start with one. Dr. Kiessling, with the SPAR program that you do, I've talked to different doctors before about like if they can do it as well, and some of them said, oh yeah, I can, but I don't. Can you speak a little bit about like why you do it, and it seems like nobody else does what you do?
I don't know exactly.
Okay.
One of the problems is that there are no commercially available assays to test semen specimens for anything. So you can't test them even reasonably for bacteria. And it's because the proteins in semen are so different from the proteins in blood, which is what all the assays are organized for. Organon, which is a big company, tried very hard, maybe 15 years ago, to come up with an HIV test in a semen specimen. And because if you think about it, if you were an infectious disease doc, you would like to know the viral burden in a semen specimen once they're healthy, right? Once they're the blood. But there are no commercially available assays. So I think that's one big thing. It's not like you're going to be able to order a kit from Sigma and do this. We use a research assay, and one of the frustrations for everyone is that it takes us a day and a half to do this assay. And if everything isn't perfect, we put internal controls in it, and if everything isn't perfect, then it's got to be repeated. So it's a tedious assay. There's absolutely no money in it. It takes like a dedicated person to do it. Now, I've been told that if we charged more and made it profitable, somebody else would have an incentive to do it. And I guess that's a business model we could think about. But from ours, so I think that's one reason. I think the other thing is that the lawyers tell these clinics, why do you want to get involved? I don't know if your lawyer told you that, but why do you want to get involved with this? What happens when this surrogate in 10 years becomes HIV infected because people become HIV infected and tries to blame the procedure? What is going to be your defense if you did everything in-house? And so I think by having this done by an outside laboratory that's, we've published I don't know how many papers on this. By having it done by an outside resource, I think it becomes kind of a, is that correct? I mean, it becomes sort of and then there are clinics, and I decided this was a really good idea. So I actually do a consult with the surrogate. So then the surrogate gets a consult also by someone who's not part of the surrogacy agency or the infertility clinic. And we don't have any particular relationships with any fertility clinics or surrogacy agencies. We've got some clinics that we don't refer to anymore, not because the clinics aren't good, but because the logistics involved in this process is something that you've really got to be willing to do. There's more logistics involved in this kind of surrogacy. And a lot of clinics don't even do surrogacy just because the logistics are so complicated for their clinic.
Just to clarify one thing, when you said like if 9 or 10 years later she becomes HIV positive because that happens, you mean separate from this? You mean like she just becomes HIV positive later on from whatever, from other actions, not from this. Okay.
But it's one of the reasons.
The monitoring you do of the carriers, postpartum. I wanted to
Yeah,
mention
so we've struggled with how to find out exactly when the surrogate has their embryo transfer, because the couples are excited, they forget to tell us that day. The clinics are really busy, they never tell us anything. So we figured out that when we have the consult with the surrogate, I cover like 4 or 5 things. One of them is you're going to get yourself HIV tested at 3 weeks, 3 months, and 6 months after the embryo transfer. We're going to make sure it happens because we're going to send you a test kit. So the surrogate is usually the most reliable person to reach out to us, either give us a call, send somebody an email. Today was my embryo transfer. And then, are you getting kits from us? No. No.
Dr. Doyle's saying he gets them.
I know.
Because Rosen, because you'll remember the fresh, but what if they come back 5 years later to have their 3rd child?
Yeah,
And
that's
then
a big
they're
problem.
so far off you're so
Yeah,
far off their radar.
That's a big problem for us. So the only way we think we can manage that is just to keep in touch with everybody. That's a big problem for us, actually.
But the point, it's not because you expect to ever see anyone convert
No.
based on any science, but it's just another level.
It's part of the way it was set up.
Part of the research study, right?
Okay.
Right. I mean, when we say that nobody's ever gotten affected, we need the pieces of paper to back that up. And the other thing we talk with the surrogates about is confidentiality, that they need to be prepared for the response. If they want to tell somebody that they're carrying an embryo from somebody whose intended parent is HIV infected, they need to be prepared for the response that person's going to. This is not going to be oh really? This is going to be what, are you crazy? So they have to. We talk about things that that you wouldn't think about unless you've been doing this for a long time. Even including whether they need to tell the obstetrician.
I know we had another question from over there. Does anybody else on the panel want to comment before we? Okay, did you have a?
Yeah, thank you, but actually you answered it.
Answered it?
The panel
Okay.
answered it, so thank you.
All right. Yes.
What is the actual physiology of the theoretical chances of the surrogate becoming HIV positive, depending on the semen? Because it seems like it would be scientifically pretty low to 0.
It
so,
is. It is.
And what's the role of sperm washing in that? Because I think it sounds like the concern is during the process of the transfer of the embryo to the surrogate that they're worried about some kind of potential. But if you guys do testing beforehand,
right?
you know,
We
all this stuff.
didn't invent the term sperm washing.
Right.
Okay, that was invented by my friend in Italy. But what we decided to do, because we discovered that not all semen specimens have virus in them, it seemed to us obvious the safe thing to do is to just use sperm from specimens that don't have any virus in them. Now, is it possible, if you go through the numbers, it's really very unlikely that anybody's going to get infected anyway, because a very high viral burden is 1 million particles per mil. A normal sperm burden in a semen specimen is like 50 million per mil. So even if the virus was really sticky and stuck to the sperm heads, the danger in a semen specimen is infected cells. And I think it's infected cells that transmit the infection. I don't think free virus in a semen specimen is even infectious. So, but now you have, in a normal sperm prep situation, everything is designed to keep the cells alive. So the only HIV that's ever been cultured from a semen specimen is from infected cells. Those cells are infected and they produce virus. So that's really the only danger, is that you would have an infected cell that you didn't see. And these sperm are counted by chambers that are not very sensitive. So, the limit to a really sensitive chamber is 10,000. So you could have 9,000 infected cells in a specimen and not know it. So that's the real, and the assay that we do looks for both free virus and infected cells. So we're really only comfortable using sperm, not just that's been washed, but sperm from specimens that we didn't detect any HIV in.
And have you seen a drop-off now that there are a lot more people on antiretrovirals?
No.
And undetectable viral, so even despite the serologic.
15 years, that's right.
Right.
Last year, for 2012, the number went up to 21% of specimens
And
tested
those were
positive.
people that were undetectable in the
In the
serum,
blood.
still had virus detectable. at
Yeah,
the same
that doesn't
time.
include the guys that are not on therapy. If you're not on therapy,
Right, it's-
then you have all, well, it isn't 100% though.
But it's high.
It's higher.
Right.
Anyone else on the call? Yeah.
So would another way of phrasing that be to say that there's really there's almost no correlation between what you find in the blood and what you find in the semen?
For somebody who's been on antiretroviral therapies for a while, there is no correlation.
When you're testing the specimen, if it comes back negative, is that 100% you can testify in a test that it's all negative, or is it possible that there's still some chance?
This is kind of a fine point. So one of the things that makes me a little uncomfortable is that some people do the testing on the sperm after it's been washed. That's not very sensitive, because that's going to test negative, because you can't put very much sperm into one of these PCR reactions because it shuts it down. It's too inhibitory. So what this research assay that we use uses half the specimen about, which is one of the reasons that we recommend everybody have 2 specimens tested, because they're half the specimens going for the test. So you're right, all we can really say is what's in the half of the specimen that we tested. But that certainly, you can't test the whole specimen, obviously. So,
And just another follow-up to that, I know you said that the risk to the gestational carrier is slim to zero, very low, but I just want to be sure so I have a full understanding of this. Your population for testing that and for saying that is fairly low, because it sounds like you've had less than 100 altogether of gestational carriers that you've been dealing with.
well, I don't think her risk is any greater than the wives.
Okay.
So I think you can take the data as a whole, and we may have more than 185 babies. I mean, we're actually in the process now of going through all the records and contacting everybody and saying, have you had any more children that we don't know about? The statisticians tell me that when we get to 400, then they can calculate a risk factor. So at 400 babies, we'll be able to have a risk factor with some kind of 95% confidence interval. We think there's no risk because the risk is low to begin with, and then we're only recommending the use of sperm from specimens that we didn't detect virus in half of the.
Anybody else care to comment?
No, I have a question for the lawyers in the audience. So how does that sound? Like, we haven't reached 400, so we don't have power, right? Statistical certainty. Yeah, I'm wondering.
If you're
Yeah.
asking from a liability perspective, if she was on the stand and someone asked her, can you tell me that this person cannot become HIV?
With reasonable
Say
degree of
yes.
certainty, yeah.
Well, what
But
I tell the
I don't think that's what what you want to say.
What I tell the surrogates is that I think there's no risk, but there's only 2 ways you could calculate a risk factor. One is for somebody to get infected, and that hasn't happened, and the other is to get to 400 babies.
When you're looking at.
If we thought there was any risk, I wouldn't do this anymore.
No, but that's different than going to a trial, right, and scaring someone, which is pretty easy to do in this country, unfortunately. Because that's why the clinics don't do it, because they're afraid of a lawsuit, not because they think the risk is not there.
Okay, well.
I understand.
But I think we need to look at all the medicine just from a legal. I worked for Surrogacy, the CEO and then director of legal, and we started working with Dr. Kiessling years ago. And I remember I was one of the main ones opposed to it. And John Weltman and I sort of had a discussion, and when he brought in all of the research that Dr. Kiessling had, that's really what changed my opinion. It wasn't just like on the surface; it was very much like, "Are you kidding? This is the end of the circle if somebody gets HIV." And I'm like, "You're insane for considering this," And then when you really looked at all of the research, it made me comfortable, and that's why we've been working. We've had no issues with the program. But no, I agree. I mean, obviously, you always want to be as secure as you can, but you know, there has to be a first in everything.
Okay.
So somebody has to have the.
Don't you think that's
I was just told that we have to end the panel, so I'm sorry, they need the room for something else. I want to thank our panelists, Kristi and Dr. Doyle, and Dr. Kiessling and Brian and Seth, and thanks to men having babies.